Treading back? Yeah, I mean, I certainly think so, Mike. I mean, and who knows? You know, I mean, they can go any direction, up, back, stay. But the one thing that when you look at where they pick at 20, and you look at the kind of the caliber of draft prospect that will probably be around, you assume that the two quarterbacks are already off the board. There's a lot of pass rushers, but those guys go early. I mean, you start talking about, you know, maybe a wide receiver, maybe an offensive lineman. It seems like a lot of offensive linemen are projected to go in that area, linebacker. It's just not, you know, really the only name that really people seem to attach to is Landon Collins, and there's a big kind of disparity between what scouts think Landon can do in an NFL scheme from a coverage standpoint, and we know that the Eagles ask a lot of their safeties to be interchangeable in cover. So, you know, if there's just not the name there that they're going to get, and if they don't think the guy at 20 is going to be that different from the guy at 28, 30, then, you know, why not move back, get more picks, which is what Chip Kelly has said he ideally wants anyway, and fill out more. They have more holes than they have picks. So they might as well, if they feel like the pool there is not that much different. And I was just on the conference call with Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis, and they basically kind of agree that, you know, once you get past out of the first 10, you start to get into a much even pool, then it makes sense to trade down.
Yeah, Jeff, let's a couple of the guys that they've brought in recently for visits, guys like Eric Rowe and Byron Jones and Brett Hundley, those are guys that would be trade-back candidates, you would think. Is 20 too high for a lot of the guys that they've been bringing in?
You know, it might be, but here's the thing, and I've talked to some people about this. People think Chip is going to be a DGAF drafter. You know what that stands for, Mike?
Go ahead, enlighten me, sir.
Don't give up.
I thought that's the way you were going, but I figured I'd let you relay those letters.
Right. So, and that makes sense, because if you think about it, Chip has got such a unique criteria for the type of athlete he wants in his program, from, you know, whether they're going to buy into all the sleep restrictions and the diet, and whether their IQ and their character and all that he might not be that type of guy. To me, he might be a want guy, get guy drafter. So I'm sitting at 20. Byron Jones really fits my scheme. Don't even care if it's too high. I'm going to get him because in my scheme, he's a first-round pick. You know, I'm going to make him that kind of caliber. He's going to be that kind of a caliber player in my scheme. You know, like a guy like Ali Marpet, the offensive lineman who raised a lot of eyebrows there, really athletic at the combines from Hobart. You know, he's kind of considered a low second-round pick, third-round pick. In my first mock, I had him going, you know, the Eagles taking him in the second round because he's such a great zone blocker, and that's what they do. Then if he's that good and that versatile in that scheme, he should be a pretty good player. And so I'm guessing, you know, Chip could be the type of guy that says, in my scheme, for what I want, this is the perfect place for him. I don't care if two other teams have him in a third or fourth round grade.
Well, that's a really interesting point. Geoff Mosher, CSN Philly Eagles insider, with us. In my scheme, which means on some people's draft boards or most conventional draft boards, maybe guys that Chip Kelly likes aren't as high on their draft boards because very few people do what he does.
And I think you know, I can't remember the last time Eagles had a draft that everybody was like, whoa, that's great. Maybe in 2012, the Fletcher Cox and Vinnie Curry and Michael Kendricks one, Boykin and Foles. But most of the time, people hate the draft, right? No matter who they get, because it's just, you know, it's natural for people to be skeptical. Well, I think that's going to be the case again. I just think that, you know, especially hearing Chip talk about how he spoke to John Schneider of Seattle, and Schneider was telling them about their draft a couple of years ago where they got Russell Wilson and Bobby Wagner, and all the experts were killing them, saying these are awful picks. How could you get these guys this round? And, you know, they turned that off and played reggae in their war room. I have a feeling that Chip's draft will be the same thing. He'll pick players, and people will say, why would you take that guy, that position? And he doesn't really care.
Jeff, Brett Hundley is an interesting guy. He was recruited by Chip Kelly at Oregon. He decided to go to nicer weather, UCLA. Then Chip turns his attention and gets Marcus Mariota. Would Brett Hundley be a guy that makes sense? And number two, if you took him, say, in the second round, you already have Sam Bradford here. Do you think it's smart to take a potential starting-level quarterback in the second round when you have so many other needs?
Well, you only have a quarterback on a one-year deal, Mike, so I think no matter where you take a quarterback, it's not a bad decision. In fact, you know, 2 weeks ago I did my first mock draft, and I actually mocked Brett Hundley to the Eagles in their first round, at 20th overall. And
Wow.
even though I know people say he's a second or third round talent, again, quarterbacks always go higher than they're supposed to. I mean, guys like Whedon, guys like Christian Pye, you see it every year. Guys either go way lower than you expect or much higher than you expect. But if Chip Kelly feels that Brett Hundley in his scheme is before I even get there, let's just put it this way. Chip Kelly is going into his third year now. He's going to have his third different starting quarterback. I personally don't see Sam Bradford being his guy in 2 years, right? You would like to see Chip Kelly finally get a quarterback that he wants, that has all the traits. Now, I know Chip has said, I don't need a mobile quarterback. It's not necessary. But the bottom line is his zone read functions well when he has one, and he can do it. And if Brett Hundley satisfies all the check marks for him, and he satisfies a lot of them. I know he's a high-character guy, smart guy, put up good numbers, he can run. I mean, he seems like the perfect Chip Kelly kind of guy for the program. Then why not take him there in the first round? Because he may not be there at 52.
Yeah, and, I don't know how much you look back to him recruiting him. He did at one time recruit Manziel, but obviously he did have his eye on Hundley, so he knows him well. So a lot of people like to connect the dots with him, but this is a guy that he obviously felt fits well into what he does.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, maybe they worked him out to see if he fits everything. I mean, some of this is just to weed out guys who don't fit as much as it is to take a look at guys who do fit. So I don't know. I mean, like you mentioned, he worked out Manziel, didn't draft him. Worked out Geno Smith, didn't draft him. He worked out he recruited E.J. Manuel just like he recruited Manziel. He recruited E.J. Manuel to Oregon. Manuel didn't go. He didn't draft him either. So it doesn't mean anything per se that he did recruit him to Oregon, except for the fact that he did at one point think that Brett Hundley would have fit his scheme in college really well and wanted him. And there's no reason to think, and Brett Hundley had a really good career, there's no reason to think he still wouldn't. It just, we don't know how much he would want him.
What about Byron Jones? A lot of he seems like he's gaining a lot of steam here recently. He's a corner, and we know the Eagles, I don't know that they have satisfied the fans anyway with that corner opposite Byron Maxwell. So if he ended up at 20, I'm sure people wouldn't be thrilled, but what do you know about him?
Well, it's interesting. Like I mentioned, I was on a conference call with Daniel Jeremiah and Charles Davis from NFL Network, and I specifically asked them about Byron Jones and what their evaluation was of him before the combine and what their evaluation of him is now and how much it may have changed. And they basically said that this guy is not a workout warrior. He's not a mystery man who just showed up with this great chiseled body and set the record in the broad jump and all of a sudden he's on the map. They said he's been a really good corner at UConn for a while. He just got hurt last year, had that shoulder surgery, missed 7 games. So Daniel Jeremiah said he was a top 50 prospect for him before, and then he moved him up to, I think, 35 or 38. But he also thinks that he can sneak into the first round. So, I asked both of them if they felt that he was better suited as a safety than a corner because he's got this big chisel frame, and they think he is, no doubt about it, a cornerback. So, if Chip took him at 20, I don't think it could fault Chip too much because it's not just a position of need for this year, but it's probably a position that they're going to have to address even at this time next year. Walter Thurman, 1-year deal. Brandon Boykin's going into his last year. So they've got Byron Maxwell, but, they're going to have to answer that question opposite Byron Maxwell for the years to come now, and it's a passing league. They got to figure out a guy.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the offensive line, Fisher, of course, who played at Oregon, so a lot of people obviously will connect dots there. But how much of a need do you think it would be to take an offensive lineman in that first round with number 20?
Well, that's it's an interesting pick. It's just one of those things like wide receiver, quarterback, safety that you look at offensive line and say, man, they really need an offensive lineman too, not just for this year but for the future. I mean, how many years are you going to get out of Jason Peters at that elite level at left tackle? And what's Evan Mathis' situation? Even if Evan Mathis is on the team this year, he's probably not going to be on the team next year. So, I mean, you're going to have to replace holes. You already have to replace one guard spot. You want to run the ball up the gut, which is what Chip Kelly says. So it's right up there with any other position that could be addressed in the first round.
Then, of course, Geoff Mosher with us, CSNPhilly.com, of course, covering the Eagles. Jeff, Landon Collins, he's probably one of the better safeties in this draft, if not the best safety. Is he a guy that you think is a good fit here? Because a lot of those Alabama guys, they seem like over the years that they haven't become, great NFL players. It seems like they might be system fits for Nick Saban in college.
Yeah, no, you make a good point. I actually wrote about it over the weekend. I did a little research on it. I'm not sure Landon Collins would really be a great fit. I mean, he is the number one safety, so I'm sure he can step into the Eagles' defense and hold it down and play at a level that's feasible. But at number 20 overall, Mike, you want to, if you're picking a safety, you want a guy who's going to be there for 10 years and hopefully make a few Pro Bowls. And, you know, he plays at 230, which is a pretty heavy weight to try to go out and cover, you know, guys down the field now. He was a great in-the-box safety, but he wasn't such a great coverage safety at Alabama. Now, granted, he's going up against some of the best every week there in the SEC, so you're going to get burned every once in a while. I don't know if people are maybe making too big of a deal about that, but I looked at this spider chart, which kind of compares the athletic measurements of prospects versus prospects in their position, and he's really not a great athlete as far as the measurable. I mean, the only thing, he ran a really fast 40. That was good. But as far as the broad jump, the triple jump, some of the other things that they measure, three-cone drill, they were really very average scores. And then I went back and looked at HaHa Clinton-Dix, and HaHa was much better athlete. So, and he went 20th. He went, what? Yeah, like 20th, right?
Yeah.
Is that right? HaHa Clinton-Dix? So, I mean, if Landon Collins is not even as good as HaHa Clinton-Dix, then do you take him to 20th overall? I don't know. I would be cautious with him.
I agree, and then, of course, there's another Collins, Jalen Collins from LSU. He's another name that continues to, it seems like, make his way into, and that's another corner, and it really depends on how much they value that opposite corner from Maxwell, whether they want to take one in that first round or one in the second round. But is Collins a guy that you like?
Well, but there's an inherent gamble involved with him because he's only started 10 games, and it's part of the reason why I looked at all these people who were talking about and some of the question marks surrounding him, and thinking more and more, it just seems to make sense to trade back. I mean, if you have questions about certain guys and you're just not 100% sure, but you feel like there's other guys at that position that are equally good or in 2 years will be just as good, then why not trade back and go for the other guy and get yourself some picks? Because, like I said, Jalen Collins, scouts love his size. They love his scheme fit for the Eagles because he's a press man corner, but he's only started 10 games, so that's a really small sample size of tape to watch on a guy and really know how he is, because he struggled the year before, I think, when he was coming in sub packages. So you're really talking about a guy who's played well in a small doses, and you're projecting what he can be more than you're actually physically able to see all the great things that he has at the NFL level.
Geoff, give me your assessment of the wide receiver situation. First round, second round, they're not that concerned because there's depth here. What do you think? How do you think they view wide receiver in this draft?
I think the problem that Chip is facing is that he really wants a wide receiver, but that the ones that are there are not necessarily going to satisfy all the check marks for him. Like a Rashad Perriman, to me, stands out as a guy that they could take a 20. And, he has good size, good length. I don't know much about his character or intelligence. His dad is Herman Moore, so not Herman Moore, Brett Perriman. So you would think having a dad who played in the NFL and was pretty good, that he'd be, in tune and know what it's like. So he's a guy. But, I've heard Jalen Strong from Arizona State, Philly native, but I haven't heard that he's like one of those guys that really wants to give you 100% on every snap. And I think some of the other guys like Devontae Parker and Kevin White, they're all going to be gone before the Eagles pick. So Nelson Aguilar is a guy that fits their scheme, but do you take him at 20? Because he's not 100%, he doesn't have all the size that you want. He does have the versatility, but again, 20 seems a little too high for him, so you just have no idea. Yeah,
you're right.
I think Aguilar is would be the guy who would want the most, Mike. But again, you want him at 20.
Yeah, and you wonder, a lot of people think they would move up to trade for Mariota, but would you be shocked if they made a move up to get a White or Amari Cooper?
No, I would not be shocked because nothing does shock me. But for a guy who wants to add picks and not give him up, I guess it would be a little surprising that he would move up and not even get Mariota out of it,
Right, exactly. Like, all this smokescreen, Mariota, and then boom, he trades up, and then you're like, oh, my God, they trade up, they're going to do it. And then boom, Kevin White. I mean, would that be the shock of the century right there?
It would be pretty surprising, but I don't think it would be an unpleasant surprise. I think people would be happy as
agreed
pigs and you know what if you got Amari Cooper or Kevin White. You start to hear a lot about Super Bowl talk. It doesn't even matter who the quarterback is at that point. They're just thinking, hey, this is a good thing.
I would agree. All right, CSNPhilly.com, Eagles insider Geoff Mosher here on a Mosher Monday as the Eagles draft 17 days away. And they, of course, will be a very intriguing team to watch on that Thursday night. Thanks, Jeff.
No problem, Mike. Thanks for having me.